Muslims in America, when surveyed, are more pro-gay marriage than their Christian evangelical counterparts, when surveyed. Muslims in Britain, when surveyed, are 53% in favor of criminalizing being gay. Now, this is the latest survey from 2016, right? And the one from America was from 2017. So when Douglas and I speak, we're speaking to a reality where 53% of my co-religionists want to ban his existence. Whereas in America, they're better than the Christians on that front. So just want to get that point clear, that there are slightly different realities. We're speaking to different emphases.
Crocodiles are nearer different boats.
And it's important to make that point, because when we speak to that specific reality, of course, our words don't stay in that reality. So we look as if we're overly focused on something when actually,
Well, so you also just have to note that there's this weird confluence between these two things, which to this day I can't make much sense of, where the postmodern left, and we can argue whether or not postmodern is the right term, given that most of the people in the category don't know anything about postmodernism. They're just behaving in a postmodern fashion. But that they are embracing and rationalizing Islamic extremism is a very interesting fact. That among the things that they don't understand is the danger of this extreme ideology that's being deployed, that is itself so very intolerant of things like homosexuality. So there is at the core, and if you haven't run into it personally, it's worth having some conversation so that you can actually hear what the thought process sounds like. But this idea that there is no reality, that all arguments, no matter how mechanistic and backed by evidence, are really power in disguise, and therefore you can make any argument, and if it functions in a powerful way, then it's as true as anything else. Therefore, stigmatizing people for things that they're not guilty of is as valid a thing to do as anything else. That concept is very destructive and dangerous, and it is backing both the attack on the Enlightenment within the academy in the West and the rationalizing of extreme elements in Islam, both of which are truly dangerous.
Well, but just trying to loop slightly back. What I was trying to get to about the Enlightenment plus. So all the good stuff of the Enlightenment plus like the dirty tricks and kind of the, we'll steal some land and take people's resources and lie about some elections and maybe assassinate some people in South America, all that kind of stuff. The whole point is to get rid of as much plus as possible. And I don't think it's possible to get rid of all of the Enlightenment plus stuff that doesn't actually make us feel good. I mean, I think it's very important to start dealing in adult-level fictions. If you're going to have a state is going to have to do bad things or it's not, I think it becomes self-extinguishing.
Yes.
And I think that for some reason, it's time to tell the kids that the tooth fairy is actually mom and dad. And that's very terrifying to people, right? We don't have one man, one vote. We don't actually have a perfect system of, the 12 people can figure out who's guilty and who's innocent. There's so much that just doesn't actually work. But it does work better.
It works okay.
And it works okay. And if we could be a little bit less childish about extolling the virtues of the Enlightenment, I think we could advance the Enlightenment a great deal more. Because I think the embittering and invidious aspect of this is when we wax rhapsodic about the Enlightenment, like, well, I've accumulated all of this wealth only by virtue of my ability to work the Enlightenment, and somebody else says, well, you did take our resources. That is an extremely angering thing, and I think, if you watch the Jordanian pilot ISIS video, which I recommend that you do not do, but some of us have.
When they burn him alive.
Yeah, well, their point, which nobody seemed to register in the West, is you kill people in this exact way, through rubble when you destroy a building and through fire when your incendiary devices go off. And the entire point of this is we are simply going to do to you what you have done to us so that you will experience something.
Which has a theological backing as well.
Yeah. And
also in the Old Testament.
Right, and so it's this thing that happens, you get to this fork in the road, which is, are we going to do the plus stuff, the Enlightenment plus stuff back to you? Or are we going to take a higher road and create something where we will be elevated above our oppressors? And I think that, the Islamic impulse too often has been we're going to do the bad stuff right back and worse. And it would be more positive if people saw that you could work the Enlightenment to create new wealth, new possibilities. And I'm concerned that when you asked about the science, there is an extent to which the great scientific discoveries have slowed. Like the 20th century was pretty horrible in terms of war and conflict, but it was absolutely astounding in terms of scientific change and understanding. And it has not kept that pace in recent years, and I think it's unlikely to keep that pace in most fields. And so we have to understand that it's going to be harder to create new wealth for some reasons I can go into, I don't want to right now, and it's going to be harder to get that kind of golden era. So there is a fear that you've missed out on the golden age of the Enlightenment, and now you're just carrying the super heavy backpack around, and you're not quite sure whether you're going to get enough out of it to make it worthwhile and allow you to catch up.
I mean, there's this other alternative that lingers in the background on all of this, which is that Enlightenment plus, Enlightenment as it is, it's all a bit passé, and there's a lot of people who say all of the things you just highlighted and more, inequality and so on, and who say, I've got another system. I've got another system of my own. That's what a lot of the people you cite, you say, why these weird cohabitations that occur? Well, that's easy. I mean, some people are perfectly happy to ride a stronger horse because they think it's going to get them to their destination. Now,
what stronger horses are you alluding to?
Well, for instance, I mean, we've had this for years in Europe. Look, by the late 1990s, the radical left, for instance, was stuck to a few people meeting in an upstairs room of a pub with a dog. And then suddenly they discovered, after the Second Intifada and after 9/11, that they were speaking to crowds of hundreds of thousands of people on occasions. That would propel you to think you might be onto something. So those people think they're riding the Islam bit. I would say that it's the other way around in that equation. But it's the sort of deal that gets done at this situation because people say, look, your society is unequal, you're not as loyal as you claim to be to your values, and your society is unfair. And of course the question you have to say or ask back is, compared to what? What are your alternatives? And every single alternative that's come up with on this is so radically worse that you can't allow it to pass for a moment. I just throw one other one into the mix at this early stage. The intersectional answer, which is one of the more coherent, albeit, I mean, that's a damning statement in itself, of the theories that have been come up with in recent years. And this one, of course, says your society is unequal, and as a result, we have found this stratospheric version of justice, which if we can only operate it in the correct way, with the correct minority identity groups coming at the right speed and in the right location, we'll do that with our society and make it whole and pure and happy. And they seem not to realize that it's like coming in at that angle and it's just going to cause the most almighty pain and far, far more unhappiness than the system they claim to be critiquing. But that's just another of the ones that's coming in. It's because this inability to say compared to what.
It's interesting that you said that you used the word alternatives quite a lot. What's the alternative? Well, I mean, Angela Merkel literally said that there's no alternative for Germans to vote for. And what's the far-right party in Germany called?
Alternative for Deutschland.
Alternative for Deutschland. So when people are robbed of a sense that there is any alternative other than a moribund status quo, you get some nasty things emerging as that alternative. But let's follow up on that last point. And Sam, maybe you have some thoughts here, because I know that you're such a fan of identity politics. That's essentially what Douglas is talking about in terms of intersectionality.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking about a story I heard. It's not on the identity politics point, but there's a story recently that I heard. I'm sure it was reported widely somewhere, but I just saw it in a series of tweets from the New York Times journalist Rukmini Callimachi, who's the New York Times.
She's doing great work.
She's great. Most of what you might have read about ISIS, at least in the Times, has been covered by her. And she tweeted about this pair of cyclists, I forget where they came from, who were run over in, I think it was Tajikistan? By someone who consciously had pledged affiliation to ISIS, and just saw in Tajikistan the way to run over an infidel is to see someone who's obviously a foreigner, and Apparently he had seen this couple riding their bicycles, clearly from some other country, and ran them over as an act of jihad. But what made this so poignant, and I think it encapsulates so much of what we're talking about here, is perhaps the most perfectly idealistic young couple on earth. They were riding all over the globe as a conscious evocation of the philosophy that we just live in one world, and they're just good people everywhere, and if you just put yourself out there, you will find that people of every culture and every race and every background and every religion will want to host you and feed you, and they encountered a lot of that, perhaps almost all of that, until they didn't, right up to the moment they were run over by jihadists. And so you had the coincidence of the youthful Enlightenment idealism, we live in one world where all well-intentioned people of whatever background will find a way to have their values converge. And it's a safe world, and it's a world where you can, with confidence, just go out and not live in fear of difference, right? And all the while, they are putting themselves in a circumstance that's tailor-made to have their idealism shattered by, most horribly, not human evil, but bad ideas that are indistinguishable from the worst of human evil.